Well, all right. Yes. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. And a couple tests. Always making sure the tape works. Everything's happening good. Well, hello, support, support, support. All right. Well, it's the July tape, and it's the 6th of July. Boy, is this man on it, or what? 3 months, 3 tapes, 3 subjects, a nice trinity. I'm up here on top of Mount Shasta, coming out of a little meditation. And I was looking around, and there's just, wow, as usual, so much to see as I look to choose or pick subjects or things that are happening or whatever. Today, I'm just sort of sitting on the road here. I was hanging out, coming up. It's, like I said, it's July 5th. No, I think it's July 6th. Let me check the calendar. Yes, indeed, July the 6th. Second day of recuperation since the 4th. What a fun event it was here in Mount Shasta. But then again, now we've got to sort of put it together. It's a new week, time to roll and go. I've been home for blissful days. That's how I explain them. I will be here blissfully throughout the healing week and the summer camp, which has definitely come along. This is it. Get happening. Well, that's on the other side. While I'm sitting here on the road, the cars every now and then come by. It's really busy here. It seemed like since the 4th, this particular town of Mount Shasta is one of the coolest places happening, because it's 114, 110 everywhere in the flat of California, and up here where we still have snow and the breeze is blowing, I look down at, let me turn this on. I look down and it's a beautiful 68 degrees. The wind is blowing, it's pleasant. Everyone else is, like I said, sweltering. So it's just really nice here, but there is going to be a lot of traffic background noise. The reason, however, that I picked this spot, this is a unique spot for me. I don't come here very often because it is right on the road, and yet I do come here somewhat often. It's a special thing. There is a state of consciousness, and so today for our little support groups, I'd like to talk a little about states of consciousness. And as a guest speaker with me here today, I have the Gatekeeper. Now, the Gatekeeper is a consciousness or state of being that has the ability to, actually create a form with physical matter around itself. Now, the way it does it is, it's just simply a vortex of spinning energy. Now, the vortex, as it moves along unnoticed until its consciousness or its self wishes to be known present, which is done through a sense of feeling, opposed to some sort of intellectual avenue. The feeling body will be one of the main focuses for this up and coming year. Now, I sort of call it an up and coming year because during the summer is when I basically change years for myself. It's my birthday, so I have a thought of year startings in those forms. I do summer camp. Basically, this time of the year every year is when inspiration appears at its peak, because this is one of the times that I'm here. And so I get to share a whole lot of different things. The feeling body, I've sort of experimented with in the last 3 workshops. I've got some really grand material. It's going to be really phenomenal because it's an avenue which not very many teachers have explored. For myself, being a student like I've always professed, I've been interested in the study of it myself, and so I'm here to share in these avenues. the Gatekeeper, as I'm referring to him, and each time I bring its name up, I can feel the essence of consciousness as it comes through the body. Now, it can be done in several ways. For instance, it can create itself as a wind. Simple. Everybody's sort of figured those out. You've seen dust devils on the road, you've seen vortexes, you've seen tornadoes perhaps, things where there's a funnel cloud. Each of these energy sources uses, if you notice, a different substance or different form to manifest its state of consciousness. And when it is done, its state of consciousness usually leaves a trail, depending on the size or what the substance was that it was using. Now let's just take a tornado. Myself, being from Cleveland, used to see a fair amount of tornadoes. Actually, in my younger day, I used to chase them down. You would see them skipping across, and you knew there was one in different areas because we used to get a lot of tornado stuff. And I'd go out to run them down to see what it would be like to get close to them. Now, I've gotten fairly close to a tornado, and the feeling body, or that essence that you feel, because the intellect goes, okay, fast-moving wind. But without being close to a fast-moving wind, all you have is, in retrospect, is, you know, say a fast wind whipping across you as you were sailing, or sticking your head out the window at 60 miles an hour. Because what are the tornadoes doing? 110, 120. So drive at 120, then stick your head out the window. Now, that's when you get a feeling of something. And the tornado itself, well, the ones that I would see would come up off the lake. So the matter that it would be using would be water, and massive winds and massive waves. And as the tornado would come, it would create this dark cloud, which would be omnibus, to say the word. I don't know if that's the right word, foreboding, but you could tell they were dark clouds, sort of like a storm. Okay, now the Gatekeeper, or a dust devil. A dust devil is going to take, oh, there's a little bee here sitting by the side of my head, just kind of hanging out, wanting to land. Hi, buddy. Back to where I was. I love all of nature. The dust devil picks up dirt, really fine particles, like, say, you're living in Kansas or Dorothy's place, and come on, Toto, and you see these giant dust devils as they, or dust storms, or whatever those things are that use dust as their matter. The Gatekeeper, as I speak of him, it's just sort of my own coined name exactly. The Gatekeeper is a feeling. It's one of those things that, if you get close enough to a tornado, when the actual power and essence is felt, you'll get goosebumps. When you see a magnificent twisting dust devil, it's really not doing any harm. It's just sort of skipping around, a little vortex of air that gathers some leaves in your front yard in the fall as you're sitting out there watching, and you see these leaves go up in a little spiral. Using the micro-macro approach, of course, to these states of consciousness, our planet is in one of those whirling senses, such as, I mean, you've all heard Carl Sagan talk, all of the universe is in a spiral. All creation is in a spiral. Your DNA is in a spiral. There appears to be consciousness within a spiral. So, as I explain the Gatekeeper, his matter, as he appears, is quite unique because he has the ability, and I'm presuming he, I don't know why, it's just what pops out of my mouth. As a Gatekeeper, it would appear he has the ability to perform several different feats. I've seen him in cloud form, without cloud, as pure wind. Now, have any of you ever been out there where the wind was so strong you could see the movement of it in space itself. You know, you could actually see the wind as it just kind of went past. It was just blowing sort of that strong, and you just sort of caught a heat wave being moved by it, and that's one example. Another example is he can pick up dust, or he can pick up rocks. Now, that then begins to demonstrate that this consciousness has the ability to use discernment to pick and choose. Now, choices of picking and choosing are higher grades of consciousness. So the gatekeeper, as I sit here talking so generalized about him, yet is also helping me with the inspiration of the words, so that the essence of this consciousness is totally felt. And the beauty of it is that any of you who come up Mount Shasta have a chance to just drive right through it, because it sort of hangs out on the road. That's why it's a gatekeeper. And therefore, any of you who just happen to come by out here or come up the mountain get a shot at this. So that's why I'm sort of enjoying the sharing of an actual state of consciousness with you. It's sort of like I introduced him. He's sitting in my essence. I'm sitting in its essence. We're sharing consciousness together. Me of it of me, and as individualized aspects of ourselves and itself, sharing part of the whole in conscious recognition of the divinity of which we are both one, of the totality, of the God, of this whole thing. By staying in present time, you're able to experience these things to different degrees depending on how close you can get to present time. Now, the gatekeeper, besides the dirt and rock, I'd like to get a little deeper on this explanation and give a practical, relatable experience for each. Something that, another car, something as I, as Dennis, have observed. First of all, its home. Let's describe its home to you. And then I'll finish a few more of its forms, because this might get a little longer than I had anticipated. The home, as I was saying, is right on the road as you come up the hill, up Everest. And it's sort of like a real windy part. And you drive down this windy part, and the side of the road is the standard dirt shoulder, and on the other side of the road is sort of a cliff thing. And as you drive, you will notice that there are no rocks, except for in certain places there's little patches. Now, this is the first thing that I began to observe. I began to observe, and I also began to notice that these couple spaces on this length of road were not only having some rocks there, but some actual huge boulders, you know, like a foot or two round. Well, maybe a half a foot to a foot and a half, because some of the bigger ones have been pushed over. As I observed, I began to notice that as I rode through there, I could feel differentials within energy fields. In other words, sometimes you would get goosebumps, sometimes you would feel something was looking at you, sometimes you would just know something. The sense of feeling and a sense of knowing without anything intellectual to go on. Then I started to notice that the rocks that were over here were in different places, and that it was darn near impossible for them to get over here. And I started paying a little more attention. After a while, I began to realize that the rocks were somehow moved, placed, rolled, lifted, pushed, and I began interested in the place, and this was years and years ago. And now I'm sitting here amidst the rocks, because it is the blessed place to hang out. The energy, the consciousness, the availability, and I'm almost sitting in a state of consciousness's living room. It's a friendly atmosphere. It's casual. It is friendly. And yet it's taken me about 6 years to gain a state of awareness to such a degree that I'm actually able to communicate consciously. Just like I'm talking to you, I talk to it, and it responds to me just like you would respond to me if I asked or talked about the weather or mentioned anything. I find that there are consciousnesses like this all over, but this one I'm being with because this is an actual interview. Sitting here in the living room, surrounded by rocks. As an actual experience, several years ago, I was coming down the road, and it was manifesting itself as a huge cloud of dirt. Now, when you go by this road, you will notice, or when you go up this road, you will notice that there are trees at the top of this cliff that are quite big. And I would just like to point out that it gets taller than those treetops, which I say are several hundred feet tall, and it gets 3 or 4 trees wide, which is approximately 200 foot or 100 foot wide. And it has the ability to run a ledge, and you can see it, and it skips, and it does all these things. While I was here with my friend, I stopped and I said, listen, I got to try this out. And so I jumped out of the car and I ran right in the center of its home. And I just stood there and I acknowledged the divinity that was within this, because whatever it is that you're going to try and talk with or be creative with, you want to go for the highest level. And you want to come from the divinity. I don't know, call me crazy, but that's it's the way I like to do it. And as I stood there, I remembered this powerful essence just standing or lingering or holding or floating or whatever, and it built all of this dirt and rocks the size of my hand with my fingers open, which is fairly big. From that size, say to, let's not exaggerate, but you know, a good foot, and let's just call that circumference, and let's just say there was 10 to 15 of those in this clump, and in this windy funnel of, now looked like a giant dust devil, except that it actually looked like a mountain spinning there. As I looked at it, I stayed with the God thought, and I thought to myself, as powerful an essence as this must be to actually lift rocks that have got to weigh, I don't know, 10 to 15 pounds, 20 pounds or more. It's hard to say. I really have a scale, so I can't weigh one. But they're heavy, and the wind just picks them up like nothing, sort of like a tornado. You know, you've heard the story of, straws through trees and stuff like that. I lived in Ohio. I've seen twisters take oaks that were 3 foot in circumference or 3 foot from one side to the other, and just twist them off like toothpicks. So I know how much power is there, and I'm standing there thinking to myself, what if this thing just comes shooting off the mountain? And I thought to myself, well, you better stay in present time, you better stay clear as a bell, and you better keep your eyes open so that you can see if any of these rocks are going to come wheeling into your head, just out of consciousness sake. And as I'm running through all of these thoughts, this magnificent essence of divinity comes flying down off the top of this cliff, drops few hundred feet, comes across, and I'm standing there with my eyes wide open, and I'm thinking to myself, okay, this is it. And I went for as high a thought as I possibly could, which is my standard. I love you, God, I love you, God, I love you, God. And as it came to me, this swirling essence of dust, as it rolled right across my body, not one single speck of dust went into my open eye, not one gigantic rock came near me, and I had my eyes open the whole time and watched it almost as we blended in time, as it went through my essence, without actually touching me with particles. And then I sort of sat inside of it, or stood inside of it, and was able to experience consciousness from a very unique place. Myself and itself as a whole experience. See, on the physical plane, the linear mind, which saw the column of dust and rock, which was solid, it was almost opaque, related to the fact that the eyes were going to get filled with sand if I didn't get knocked out with one of the giant rocks, just to sort of try and shake hands with this essence. On the other hand, if you're in present time and you're loving yourself as you're loving it, because you and it are one, as you and the totality are one, there is a blending of trust that goes beyond the limits of the brain, and within that moment you will experience its consciousness from a place of trust. Because if you trust it enough, it will not harm you, because you and it are one and the same as the whole. And I experienced a trust and a faith within ourselves, that wholeness with it and you, as I share with you and it together. We were able to experience a wholeness where consciousness and form could be literally seen with the physical eye, and yet you knew that it wasn't the same type being as you, because we are not dust particles or spinning vortexes of energy, and yet we are, because our form is meat and hair and bone, and its form is dust and rock or wind or cloud, or anything that this consciousness wants, because it supersedes dust and wind and cloud, and it goes right to essence, because it is consciously capable of picking different cloaks of matter. It is therefore conscious enough to know that it does exist within totality, and we as such also do. We shared in that split second a bridging of time and space, and because I wasn't thinking, the dust just stopped for some reason, and we became one as the whole. Those little touches of consciousness where you go, wow, there are other consciousnesses, they are capable of being made contact with, they are states of being that have been honored and prayed to by cultures long since forgotten, and yet as consciousness we still have inklings and knowing of these things, of these essences. It's like, on different scales, it's like, how many of you have watched dogs when they go to lay down? They'll look for a spot, they'll turn, and boom, they'll finally lay down in a perfectly well-chosen spot. It's because they found an invisible spiral, an invisible state of consciousness, that perfection part of the whole, where they knew they would be safe with the Creator and themselves as one. And you can see a dog as it picks that spot on the ground and actually makes that turn and settles itself down. These gatekeepers, as I call them, are no more or no less equal than these. Some just have the capacity to manifest in different form, if that sort of explains those things. Or those little tiny vortexes, or as your tub drains and you get that water going, and see that little whirlpool created by water. It's because energy is concentrated there, and therefore it creates life unto itself, which is the consciousness, which we are talking about, stepping into consciousness, which is just another part of who we are, of being, of all of these things. And I guess I just wanted to share as a talk this consciousness that I call the Gatekeeper with you, and sharing also, as I bridge off on the material, all of the different things that are there in our backyard, in our house, If we have dogs or you know, certain animals, how they spin and find their areas. So it's like you don't really have to go anywhere to find these places. They are right there in our homes, our backyards. Some people have bigger backyards. We've seen these little spirals out there. We've seen the wind as it sort of spins. We've watched the smoke from the backyard burning in the leaf pile or the trash barrel. All of a sudden, as it just sort of drifts and the wind catches it and you see a spiral. Well, just as these things are everywhere, so are we. Nature and ourselves are one. And I guess I'm just wanting to point out how we see these little things everywhere as they see us everywhere. And that because this consciousness is advanced to degrees of choice, I'm sharing its home, its yard, its consciousness as it sits here and shares with me. I share that with you. And I feel that this is unique within itself. As I looked at the dust as it went through me and then found myself within the quiet inside, or the eye of the storm, or the center of that rushing water in the tub when you was a kid and you could kind of put your finger in the center and somehow feel the calm that was in there and the still. Like all of those, the consciousness to the inside is calm and still. And the whirlingness of the outside is much like the shell. The same I noticed as with us. That gentle consciousness that is within us. And yet the matter, which is our human body, much like the matter of the dust and the dirt and the rocks and the chunks of boulders, that this consciousness being was manifesting. And I noticed the similarities within all things. We all take form in some matter, some way, to, I don't know, disguise ourselves, or to present different pictures of ourselves. There is so much to learn from this one example of the Gatekeeper that I'm just going to continue and continue on this one state of consciousness, because it looks like I can bring it into micro macro quite easily here, and it looks like we can really get to see a lot of different perspectives of ourselves in relationship to a state of consciousness that lives on the side of a mountain, whose very presence and essence is just lifting in wind right now as we speak of him, and as my heart of the totality and its heart or its essence of totality and your heart of totality and essence all reach together to feel this essence. As I reach within inside of myself and within inside of you and it to come up with the right feeling as I share within this tape. I see it's coming to an end here. Let's flip to the other side of the tape and I'll join